Welcome to the Pencil Bob channel. I hope you enjoy my stories.
I live in one of the oldest neighborhoods in the state. Some houses on this block were built in the 1700s. My house, built in 1825, it's big, sprawling, and sits on 4 acres of land that's been passed down, bought, restored, and lived in for generations. It's not a modern box with beige siding and a sad little tree out front. No, this place has history. Thick wooden beams, iron fixtures, original stone foundations. It smells like stories. When the wind blows just right, you swear you can hear echoes of the past whispering through the shutters. Those shutters, by the way, the original wood. I restored them myself 10 years ago with the help of a friend who specialized in historic preservation. They're painted the same rich green they've been since before the Civil War. They're part of the house, part of the identity, and I loved every creak and crack of them. Over the past 30 years, though, my neighborhood has changed. Bit by bit, piece by piece, big lots started getting subdivided. You'd blink and suddenly one stately old home was gone, replaced by 5 new builds that all looked like they were stamped out of the same plastic mold. Beige, square, and forgettable. And with them came a new kind of neighbor, younger, flashier, obsessed with rules and appearances. Last year, one of them moved in a few houses down. We'll call her Karen. She arrived like a storm. First thing she did was complain about the gravel road between our houses. Next, she threw a fit about someone's antique tractor parked in a driveway. Then she decided the neighborhood needed order. That's when she started the HOA. It started quietly. A few houses here and there, mostly the new ones, signed on. She went door to door like a Girl Scout selling rules instead of cookies. At first, no one paid much attention. I certainly didn't. But within a few months, she had 60% of the houses signed up. And then came the rules. They weren't just silly. They were absurd. No parking on the street. Not even for 5 minutes. That meant deliveries, moving trucks, visitors. They had to park 2 blocks away and walk. Houses had to be painted one of 6 approved colors. I saw the swatches she was handing out. All 6 were some variation of beige, taupe, or beige. Like she thought she was redecorating a waiting room. Lawn height had to be below 3 inches. Grass clippings must be bagged. No lawn decorations, not even a bird bath or a flag. Garbage bins had to be hidden at all times. You could only place them at the curb after 7 a.m. on garbage day. They had to be pulled back by 5 p.m. sharp or you'd be fined. And then, the final blow. No shutters at all. Apparently, she read somewhere that shutters were cluttered looking. I laughed when I heard that last one, until she showed up on my porch, clipboard in hand, lips pursed like she was sucking a lemon. Cinnamon, her ridiculous Pomeranian, tucked under her arm like a fuzzy grenade. "You're in violation of several community standards," she said, like she was quoting scripture. "I didn't sign your HOA," I replied. "All homes in the neighborhood are considered members." The HOA board voted. I crossed my arms. "You can't do that. You think just because you got half the newbies to join, you own the rest of us? That's not how law works. It's in the revised charter. You'll be getting a letter. Let me save you the postage," I said. "Send anything you want. My lawyers will love the exercise." And they did. We sent a cease and desist letter the same week. She didn't back down. I started getting anonymous complaints. Weed growth along my fence line. Rust on the hinges of my side gate. A wind chime that was too loud. My mailbox was vandalized twice. My fence was scratched up with keys. Coincidence? Maybe. But my money was on Karen. She went around telling everyone I was being combative. That I was refusing to cooperate with community expectations. The only thing I refused to do was let some vinyl siding tyrant dictate what my historic home could look like. It was around this time I got official notice from the city. The heritage designation had gone through. That meant my home was now legally protected. Karen couldn't make me remove a single brick without a review board approving it first. The shutters? Permanent. The colors? Historical standard. She had no power here, but she thought she did. Every summer, I head to Europe. 3 months of museums, food, and quiet. I left my house in the care of a local property manager. I gave them clear instructions. Water the plants, check the mail, and don't let anyone touch a thing. 3 weeks before I got home, they stopped responding. I assumed they were on vacation too. When I finally pulled into my driveway, something felt wrong. The shutters were gone. Not just removed, gone. The nails had been ripped out of the wood. My flower beds were torn up. The fence was gone. A new one, thinner and crooked, had been slapped in its place. The worst part, she painted the trim beige, sloppy brush strokes over 200-year-old carved wood. It looked like a crime scene. There was a fat envelope in my mailbox. From the HOA. From Karen. It was an invoice. Total due for HOA compliance renovations. $482.23. She itemized it like it was an Amazon order. Labor, paint, disposal, landscaping, fence replacement, shutter removal, forbidden exterior decor. I read it 3 times, each time slower than the last. Then I went inside, poured a scotch, and called Jack. "My lawyer, Jack," I said, holding up the envelope. "We're going to war." He didn't ask questions. He just laughed and said, "Let's make her regret ever learning the word bylaws." Jack got to work immediately. We weren't just talking about a petty squabble over shutters. This was full-blown unauthorized destruction of a legally protected heritage property. The kind of thing that can trigger not just civil penalties, but criminal ones too. Jack grinned when I sent him the pictures. She really thought she was untouchable. Let's see how she handles court. We filed in civil court within the week. The initial charges: property destruction, trespassing, fraudulently billing for unauthorized work, and defamation. The Heritage Council added their own complaint. Karen had violated municipal codes that protected designated landmarks. That meant city inspectors were now involved. And they weren't gentle. Karen tried to act like it was nothing. She brushed it off, saying, "We're just talking about a few old pieces of wood. For goodness sake." Jack responded by mailing over 3 official heritage preservation affidavits, complete with images, measurements, restoration permits, and financial valuations. He followed that up with a notice of intent to subpoena city preservation officers, HOA board members, and contractors involved in the unauthorized work. Within 2 days of being served, Karen's posture changed. She started posting long, passive-aggressive screeds on the HOA message board about hostile individuals attacking the spirit of community. That didn't stop the court from setting a hearing. The courtroom was packed. Apparently, news of the case had spread. Neighbors, HOA members, even a couple of local historians showed up. Some came with popcorn. I walked in next to Jack, calm and cold. Karen strutted in like she was attending a garden party. Wide-brimmed hat, massive sunglasses, and a white linen dress like she was pretending to be Jackie Kennedy. The judge was an older man named Judge Greeley. He didn't smile once. His voice cut through the courtroom like a knife through stale bread. "You did this work without consent?" he asked after reading the brief. Karen stood up. The HOA had to enforce standards. "Your Honor." Jack didn't even bother standing yet. He leaned back and said, "My client isn't, and never was, a member of the HOA. That document is right in front of you, signed and notarized. Their rules don't apply to him. This was a forced alteration to a protected property." Karen started rambling. "He left the house unkempt. There were vines, overgrowth, totally unfit for our neighborhood image." The judge narrowed his eyes. "And that gave you the right to trespass and alter a landmark?" Karen's lawyer fumbled with papers. "We were operating under assumed charter authority." Judge Greeley slammed his palm on the desk. "Assumed? You authority over a city-designated landmark?" "Ma'am, this isn't a PTA bake sale." The room practically vibrated. For the next 3 days, it was open season on Karen. Jack brought out photos, before and after. I testified about the trip, my instructions to the property manager, and the invoice Karen left in my mailbox. We had video testimony from the preservation officer who did the final heritage inspection just before I left. City inspectors testified next. One held up paint chips and barked. She slathered latex paint over 200-year-old oak carvings. "This is architectural vandalism." Karen tried to shift the blame onto the HOA board, but the board wasn't having it. 2 members testified against her, saying she acted unilaterally and never brought the house up for a vote. Then Karen tried to get creative. She submitted screenshots of neighborhood Facebook comments as proof that residents supported her. The judge squinted at the paper and muttered, "Since when does a, count as legal precedent?" At one point, she turned around and tried to appeal to the crowd. "Don't you all want a clean, uniform neighborhood? Don't you want to raise your home values?" Someone from the back shouted, "Not by bulldozing history." On the final day, Jack dropped the hammer. He brought in the historian who had helped me restore the shutters years earlier. The man had a detailed timeline, full documentation, and appraisals showing the value Karen had destroyed. Then came the city's ruling. In addition to the court's ruling, the Heritage Office declared Karen ineligible for any building permits for 2 years. Her name was added to the violation registry. The judge's final statement was brutal. Ms. Karen, not only have you violated city and civil codes, but you have also insulted the heritage of this community. You are hereby ordered to restore the house to its previous condition at her own expense, pay fines from the city for violating heritage protection laws, reimburse my legal fees in full, issue a written apology, approved by the court. Karen's face cracked. The smirk was gone. Her mouth twitched. Her lawyer stood to object and was immediately silenced by the judge. Sit down. This is not a debate. Outside the courthouse, the press had shown up. Karen tried to slip out the side door, but someone shouted, "Hey, Karen! Still think shutters are illegal?" That quote made the evening news, along with the phrase, "HOA tyrant loses in landmark trial." The ripple effects were immediate. Board members resigned. Emails leaked. Karen's texts to contractors showed up on local blogs. Neighbors who'd hated her rules came forward, complaining about petty fines, verbal abuse, and HOA overreach. Within 2 weeks, Karen's little empire was in shambles. The HOA meeting scheduled at her house was canceled with no explanation. A week later, half the board stepped down. The bank account was frozen pending audits. By the end of the month, the HOA was gone. Dead, dissolved under its own weight and legal exposure. Karen listed her house quietly, like she hoped no one would notice. But people did. I printed out the invoice she sent me, had it framed, and hung it next to the fireplace. Next to it, a fresh photo of the house with its shutters restored in a massive banner, protected by law. Jack and I still joke about it. She gave you a free renovation and destroyed herself in the process, he said, raising a glass. I raised mine back. Here's to HOA disasters. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think after losing in court, after being shamed in front of the neighborhood, after having to repaint my home and rebuild my custom shutters with historic wood under threat of another lawsuit, Karen would vanish, crawl into the beige hole she came from and let the community heal. But no, she wasn't finished. 3 weeks after the ruling, I got another letter. Not from the HOA. It no longer existed, but from a private mediation firm. Karen had filed a formal complaint seeking damages for defamation, harassment, and neighborhood hostility. I stared at the letter, then started laughing. She was trying to flip the script, claim she was the victim. That my refusal to conform, my legal victory, and the subsequent neighborhood backlash had made her feel unsafe and alienated. Jack read the letter, chuckled once, and said, "She wants a fight. Let's give her the rematch she doesn't deserve." We didn't even entertain mediation. We responded by filing a countersuit. Malicious prosecution. This time we brought in neighbors. Testimonies. The ones she fined for leaving their Christmas lights up 2 days past New Year's. The woman whose kid got written up for drawing with sidewalk chalk. The couple who were told their bird feeder was an eyesore. Turns out, nobody liked Karen. The hearing was scheduled 6 weeks later. Karen showed up in a conservative gray dress like she was trying to appear mature. Her new lawyer looked barely out of law school. She didn't meet my eyes once. The courtroom felt different this time. Heavier. The judge, a woman this round, had clearly read the previous case. She was stern, precise, not easily fooled. Karen took the stand. I felt targeted, isolated. The HOA was meant to build community standards, and instead I was treated like a villain. Jack rose. You forcibly altered someone else's property without consent, then billed them. After losing the case, you filed this complaint based on your own embarrassment. This isn't justice. This is revenge. He turned to the judge. We have 13 signed statements from neighbors citing year of her abuse of power. Selective enforcement, threats, intimidation. This woman tried to create a miniature dictatorship in a historic neighborhood. Karen's face tightened. Her knuckles turned white on the armrest. Her lawyer stammered through weak defenses, but it was all too little, too late. The judge dismissed her claims entirely, called the filing frivolous, sanctioned her for wasting court resources. Then she said something that stuck with me. Ms. Karen, you've confused leadership with control. What you built wasn't a community. It was a regime, and regimes fall. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting again. Karen tried to cover her face with her handbag. People booed. And that's when the real downfall started. A former HOA treasurer came forward, claimed Karen had mishandled funds, spent thousands in HOA money on consulting fees, which turned out to be her sister, bought luxury patio furniture for board meetings that never left her own yard. Someone even found emails where she called residents sloppy peasants and heritage hillbillies. The treasurer gave everything to the authorities. Investigations opened. Karen's house went up for sale again, this time at a desperate markdown. No one wanted it, not after everything. Her name was mud in the neighborhood. The media dug deeper. A reporter tracked down former neighbors from Karen's last town. Turns out, this wasn't her first HOA debacle. She'd left a trail of pissed-off residents and fractured boards behind her. A podcast even picked up the story. The Shutter Showdown became a local sensation. They brought in city historians, real estate agents, and angry ex-HOA members to dissect every step of Karen's collapse. Then came the civil penalties. The city filed an additional complaint regarding her misuse of HOA funds. Fines racked up. Her accounts were audited. Her sister had to return the consulting payments. And the board meeting furniture confiscated. The neighborhood felt lighter. People put out Halloween decorations like they were celebrating a revolution. Someone made a life-sized Karen mannequin and stuck it on a porch with a fake eviction notice taped to her forehead. It made the local paper, but it didn't stop there. One of the neighbors, a retired sign maker, began crafting wooden plaques that read, "Historic Freedom Zone," and mounted one to every former HOA member's mailbox with their blessing. They caught on fast. Soon every house on the block had one, even the newer ones. A few of the ex-board members tried to keep a low profile. One sent a private apology letter to me, handwritten, admitting they felt pressured to support Karen out of fear. I didn't respond. Some things don't deserve closure. One evening, Jack and I were sipping scotch on my porch. We watched a moving truck rumble past. Karen's final load. "Think she'll try again somewhere else?" I asked. Jack snorted. "Only if the town has amnesia." I almost admire her persistence. Almost. "She's a warning whispered behind closed doors, wrapped in beige siding," Jack said, raising his glass. Karen moved out in the middle of the night. No goodbye, no explanation. The new owner of her house tore out the hedges she had trimmed with military precision and replaced them with wildflowers. Me? I had my shutters restored. Again. The original woodworker even found matching iron hardware from a salvage yard. Looks better than before. Every evening, when I sit on the porch and sip my drink, I glance at the framed invoice hanging by the front door. A trophy, because Karen tried to turn a quiet, historic street into her personal kingdom. And she failed, spectacularly. The neighborhood was never going to be the same. And I'm not saying that in some sentimental, nostalgic way. This was scorched earth, just without the flames licking the sky. Karen had left behind a crater, and the crater was still smoldering long after she vanished into the night. Her house sat empty for months. I swear, you could feel the silence screaming from it like a wound left to fester. No lights, no sounds, just that beige box of misery staring down the street like a monument to a failed regime. Even after it finally sold, the new owners took their sweet time. Half a year passed before they moved in, and those months were spent tearing down Karen's legacy, undoing her obsessive improvements. They stripped away the vinyl shutters she'd slapped on, the beige, uniform pieces that were supposed to enforce HOA conformity but instead looked like cheap plastic insults glued to an otherwise proud old house. They ripped out the fake turf she'd planted in the front yard to avoid mowing, because even that was part of her rigid order, a sick joke on nature itself. Every trace of her obsession with uniformity got yanked out like invasive weeds in spring. The neighborhood felt raw, still did, months and years later. People weren't talking to each other the way they used to. Where casual hellos and small chats by the mailbox had once been routine, now there was silence. Cautious steps. We all walked on eggshells, unsure who had been her loyalists, who had quietly cheered her on from the shadows, and who had just been too scared to say a word. Trust was broken, dead in the water, and nobody was offering an apology. One afternoon, I ran into Tom from 2 streets over. Older guy, retired Army, the kind who didn't say much before all this blew up. He was watering his roses, stooped but steady, the way veterans do, patient but wary. "Hey, Jack," he said, tipping his battered old hat. "Still got those shutters back up?" I smiled. "Better than ever." He nodded, eyes squinting at the sun. "We should have stopped her earlier. You know, we all saw the signs. But we figured she'd get bored. Move on." Yeah, we all figured wrong. She didn't get bored, and none of us stopped her. That's the brutal truth. Even with Karen gone, the damage lingered like a stubborn stain. Some of the neighbors she fined or harassed ended up selling their homes. The family with the chalk drawing daughter? They packed up and left town. The older couple with the metal rooster sculpture in their yard? Gone too. Too many sour memories, too much bitterness tied to the place. There was talk about forming a new neighborhood council, a real one this time. No power to fine, no secret handshakes, just a way for people to talk again, to figure out how to rebuild trust. But that idea never got off the ground. Suspicion ran too deep. Everyone wanted to be heard, sure. But nobody wanted to listen. I stayed. No way I was leaving. That house has stood through wars, depressions, floods, and more. Karen wasn't going to be the reason I walked away. Months after the dust had settled, one afternoon I got a knock on the door. A woman, early 40s, carrying the kind of nervous energy only someone new to a place has. She introduced herself as the new homeowner of Karen's old house. Just wanted to say hello, she said, shifting from foot to foot. We've heard stories. I don't know how much is true. I gave her a slow, knowing smile. It's probably worse than what you've heard, but I'm glad you're here. Just be yourself. We don't do overlords on this street. She laughed, a little breathlessly. Not planning on it. I just want to plant a real garden. Maybe some sunflowers? You do that, I said. No rules, just roots. I watched that house like a hawk for the next year, because we'd all learned something. Not in a warm, after-school special kind of way, but the kind of lesson that leaves a scar. Nobody talks about Karen anymore, but everyone remembers. Her name has turned into a whispered warning, passed between fence posts and folded into hushed tales told to every newcomer like a dark neighborhood legend. That old HOA charter? It was burned. Literally. Someone tossed it in a fire pit at a backyard barbecue, and no one stopped them. Flames curled and danced over the brittle pages like a funeral pyre. The grass grew wild again in places. Lawns were allowed to be messy, colorful, imperfect. Someone painted their mailbox neon green just to prove they could. One guy built a giant wooden dragon in his front yard for Halloween and left it up until March because screw the rules. It wasn't perfect. It was loud, messy, unpredictable, like a living thing. And honest. That's what Karen never understood. She thought perfection meant control. But this place was never meant to be perfect. It was meant to be lived in. The cracks Karen left in the neighborhood didn't just vanish. Some neighbors stayed silent but distant. Others moved away quietly, hearts too heavy to stay. A few who stuck it out had lasting grudges, and those grudges sometimes turned the simplest interactions into tense standoffs. Mary, the woman who had been fined for having too many flower pots on her porch, barely speaks to anyone now. She used to smile at everyone. Now, it's a rare thing. The Wilsons, whose dog barked too much under Karen's surveillance, ended up selling their house after constant harassment drained their energy. Their kids left behind empty rooms and broken dreams. Even me. I found myself double-checking the small details on my own property, worried I'd somehow missed something. But every time, I reminded myself who had real power here and who didn't. And for every story like those, there was another one about quiet resistance. Like Mrs. Diaz, the elderly widow who planted a wildflower garden right at the edge of the curb, defying HOA standards with every bloom. Or Sam, the teenager who spray-painted a mural on a long-neglected wall, a colorful riot of rebellion. Our little neighborhood wasn't perfect anymore, but it was alive, unfiltered, real. Karen's name still pops up now and then, at block parties, over fences, in hushed conversations. Remember when, and, can you believe, get tangled with, I'm glad she's gone, and hope she never comes back. Somewhere deep down, we all know Karen's shadow won't fully leave us for a long time. But we're learning how to live in the light. I've seen the new neighbors move in. Kids running wild, dogs barking, gardens growing like they want to swallow the sidewalks. And those shutters of mine? They're still green, still bold, still a little stubborn, just like me. Because this street isn't about control or conformity anymore. It's about living, breathing, making mistakes, learning, growing. And that, more than anything, is the true spirit Karen could never crush. My shutters are still green. This whole story is a clear example of what happens when people with zero respect for history get a taste of power. Karen didn't just overstep, she stomped all over something irreplaceable. That house built in 1825 wasn't just someone's home. It was part of the community's identity. Historic properties are meant to be protected, preserved, and treated with care. not beige washed and gutted to fit some delusional standard of uniformity. Karen had absolutely no business touching a single shutter, let alone charging for renovations that were illegal and completely destructive. The fact that she actually believed she could rewrite neighborhood structure just by adding a rule shows how deranged these HOA power grabs can get. She weaponized the HOA to settle personal grievances, plain and simple. Anyone who can rip the shutters off a protected heritage home and send a bill afterward deserves every ounce of legal hell that followed. HOAs were supposed to help communities maintain shared spaces, not allow narcissists to pretend they're royalty. Karen destroyed the trust between neighbors, drove people out of their homes, and tried to erase decades, centuries of architecture and tradition. If that's not grounds for permanent disbanding of an HOA, then what is? Glad to see her little dictatorship went down in flames. What Karen did wasn't just petty, it bordered on criminal. Creating an HOA and then claiming people were automatically members without their consent? That's not how contracts work, and she knew it. You can't just fabricate authority and shove it down people's throats. The second she said, "You're a member whether you like it or not," she was declaring war on basic rights. It's chilling how quickly one person can twist community rules into weapons. What's worse is how many people went along with it, thinking it was easier to comply than to fight. That's how control spreads, through fear, silence, and apathy. Jack did exactly what more people need to do: push back hard and drag the whole thing into court where nonsense doesn't hold up. Watching her HOA nonsense fall apart in front of a judge was the justice this story needed. It's also a reminder that these HOA structures aren't as bulletproof as people think. All it takes is one bad actor to show how fragile and badly designed they really are. And when someone like Karen grabs the wheel, it stops being a community and becomes a kingdom. Good riddance to the HOA and everyone who enabled it. What people often forget is that HOAs don't just enforce rules, they shape relationships. And in this case, Karen's HOA didn't just ruin some landscaping or paint schemes. It ruined a community. Before she came along, the neighborhood might have had its quirks, but it had character. After her reign, suspicion, silence. People didn't talk to each other. Friends moved away. Trust was gone. That kind of social damage takes years to repair, if it ever does. Karen didn't build anything. She dismantled everything that made the area feel like a neighborhood in the first place. When you start finding people over sunflowers or flags or mailbox color, you're not enforcing order. You're erasing individuality. And when you tell someone who owns a heritage home that their historical shutters are unacceptable, you're not managing aesthetics. You're being a tyrant. Worst of all, the people who didn't agree with her but stayed silent helped her succeed. That's what makes this story even more frustrating. The real harm wasn't just Karen. It was also the fear she spread, the passive acceptance from neighbors, and the way everyone looked away until it was too late. Glad to see the HOA charter go up in flames. That was the most unity the neighborhood had seen in a long time. Hopefully they leave it in the ashes.
I would like to thank you for watching the video to the end. To encourage us to make more videos, please like, subscribe, comment, as well as share. Check out this other video if you haven't already.